Hello, Dr. Salem. Can you hear me?
Hi, it's great to be here today. Yeah, it's great to be here today and super excited about this show today. I think this is one that I've been looking forward to for a really long time. This is what gets us out of bed every day, I would think. This is the exciting one. So, you want to tell us what we're going to be talking about today?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's as you said, it's the stories that give us hope. I mean, I can't tell you how many times patients will say to me, like, can you give me a story of hope, or do I have any hope in this situation? I tell people about my own story. Where again, three eggs we had and able to have success. Um, and I like to share stories of other people as well. And so I definitely have some stories I want to share. And I'm sure you have some stories you can share as well, some kind of like, amazing stories. But what would be best is if people can come on and share their stories. I don't think there's anything better than real life stories from actual, doesn't have to be our patients, you can be from anywhere. It doesn't have to be with us. We are happy you're had success regardless where you're from. And I know we have some guests going to be coming on, but any interesting stories that you have that you could share with them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, gosh, I just think back over the years as we've been doing this, and stories kind of some of them are the ones that are against all odds. Definitely have some of those. Have some stories where people just didn't give up. I remember a specific patient. They went through, believe it or not, 8 IVF cycles and had their baby with the eighth one. And that was one of those kinds of things where that just it was an absolute marathon, and they just kept going. And would love to share some of those stories today. But I agree. I mean, I love nothing more than hearing the stories, not from our perspective. I think our perspective has something to offer, I hope, but I would love to hear it from the side of the moms and the dads out there, the ones that became mothers and fathers as a result of success stories. So,
Well, I would like to share a couple of stories because, like I said, I have some that I just, I'm sure people will top them better than me. But um, there's a couple of stories that really, for me, jumped out. One of them was a patient who actually wasn't a patient of mine at my clinic, but back when I used to work with Dr. Patel, and a great doctor there, and he was taking care of a patient, great patient, and she kept doing transfer after transfer. She had 8 embryos, and this was before we were doing PGT as much. And she literally went through every embryo. On the very last one, where she almost just gave up hope, she went and did the transfer on the very last one. That was the one that worked, which kind of goes against common sense, right? I mean, the common sense would say, well, that's your worst embryo. Why would that work? But the thing is, as you and I know, is that sure, the other ones might have had higher potential, but there's lots of things that have to work. And so even on the eighth embryo, after seven failed, and I honestly can't remember how much we changed things, but we didn't change it that much. There wasn't the ERA at that time. There wasn't Receptiva, um, and it still worked. And that's what people did. They just kept trying and trying until it worked. Um, and so I think for people when they get worried that it doesn't work, it's always important to know that there still is a chance. I have another good one too, but before I go into that one, I'd love to hear a really interesting one that you have. Think there might be a little bit of a delay.
yeah, I'm sorry. There's a little bit of a technical issue on my end, but I'll tell you of one story that comes to mind. And this person is a Instagram, IVF influencer, and I really like encourage people to follow her. Healthy IVF, and um, her handle is Healthy IVF. It's the on Instagram, and she was a patient who, and she has this all on online. So I'm only sharing the things that she has online. She was a patient who went through and had some complexities of her uterus. And so the idea was, how aggressive to be with the surgeries to kind of fix the uterus, let's say. And one thing led to another, and after having not been successful with, I think it was a 7 or 8 embryo transfers at another place, we decided to kind of look at things through a fresh lens. And we went back to the drawing board. We went to surgery, sort of fixed the uterus, and did a bunch of other things. And the first embryo honestly didn't work, and she was very, very disappointed. And then very luckily, the second one did work. And so this would have been, I believe, either her 9th or 10th total embryo transfer. And from that, she came away with her firstborn child, and since has had a second. So it just was one of these remarkable stories where, against all odds, it just felt like people were all telling her, hey, you need to get a gestational carrier, a surrogate, all these kinds of things. And she didn't, want to do that for many reasons. And so we honored that. And I remember kind of going through it, and I'd say, your chances aren't really high here. I don't know we can really change anything, but I can try. And sure enough, we came away with this win. And her whole story is chronicled, Healthy IVF, on Instagram. I think it's just people to check it out.
Yeah, it's interesting how, if you've been doing this long enough, you know that the chance of getting pregnant now are so much higher. But I feel like sometimes people lose hope a little faster now. Like, I think back in the past, when it used to take 8, transfers or something to get pregnant for some people, now there's this high expectation by the second, if you're not pregnant, something must be seriously wrong. And it's not true, but it is true that we are better. There are more tests now that we can look at. And so we're able to get to the problem a little bit faster, whereas before it was kind of just trial and error. I think that's one of the biggest changes. One that I thought was really interesting was, I had this great couple. They were just the cutest couple. And she had a horrible ovarian reserve. I mean, just horrible. And we were going through, and I think probably have told this story before, but they were going through, and it was just a bad cycle. Most of the cycles they were making like 5, 6 eggs, but this one they were making like 1 egg, and it was just bad. And I remember, like, I think I told you about this, in my heart I was just like, what if this is like a challenge? Like when people talk about all the time, like, well, where's God? It's like, well, maybe he's there all the time, but we just don't notice these challenges. And I said to them, listen, do me a favor. I have to know. Let's just finish this cycle. I told him, I said, if it doesn't work, I'm not even going to charge you for the next one. This is how much I just have this feeling. And that was the one that we got the embryo. That was genetically normal, and they got pregnant with it. And before that, they went through 3, 4 cycles. But it was their worst cycle ever was a cycle they had success. And interesting enough, this just happened with another case. I had a case with a young couple, same thing. They went through, her partner unfortunately has severe sperm problems, even worse than mine, which is hard to believe, but there are people who are worse than me. And it was so bad that when we went to fertilize, like, she had something like 18, eggs, and then something like 14 were mature. 2 embryos, both came back genetically abnormal. This time we went, got 25 eggs. Unfortunately, we could only find 6 sperm. And we fertilized them, and this is the one they got the normal embryo from. And so, again, here's a situation where things were worse, but they turned out actually better. And I don't tell you the happy ending on that one yet, because we still have to do the transfer. But the point is that, these stories of hope. And so, again, if you've had success, no matter what, even just naturally, let people know that you struggled and eventually did. We'd love to hear your stories. We do have some people that we're going to be bringing on planned, but we'd love to have unplanned people just coming on to discuss. Any other ones you want to share that you have, Dr. Salem?
Yeah, definitely. There's one of a patient, especially I remember this one, very well, because it was a patient who was very unfortunately had gone through chemotherapy for breast cancer, had surgery and chemotherapy, and her ovarian reserve was like really reduced, and she came back, and basically her OBGYN was like, listen, this doesn't look good. Your FSH is really high, and there's virtually no eggs left. And we tried a couple different things, and her first IVF cycle did go poorly. Tried a couple other things, and it was one of these moments where we said, okay, well, we're just trying to ultimately get to an embryo transfer. She was like, I've never had an embryo transfer. I think she had at this point gone through 2 IVF cycles and didn't have any embryos. And so, lo and behold, we said, okay, well, we're going to do an embryo transfer sort of no matter what. And we did an embryo transfer. It was just one embryo that remained, and we did an embryo transfer with that on her 3rd IVF cycle, and they were right about to go to donor. And of course, that led to their baby. And I again just thought that was such a remarkable case. One of these things where objectively it just doesn't look like it's going to work, and then sure enough, it does. And I think, I think sometimes we take it for granted for all the patients that go through, and I never want to say it's easy, but it's more linear, right? Like they have an IVF cycle, maybe they don't have the first embryo transfer work, but the second one works, or maybe everything works. I mean, we have so many patients nowadays where it's the first retrieval and the first embryo transfer, and it's, goes smoothly and they have a baby. But for all those cycles that things go relatively like more straightforward, there are cases out there that you never lose sight of. You just always remember them, about the person who you wanted it to work for them so badly, but you just weren't sure if that ever would objectively. And it's just great to get the win, so great for them to have the baby and see them afterwards. And, they also, many of them come back, and I feel like they talk about, IVF is 100% science and 100% magic, right? It's there's no rhyme or reason why, sometimes things don't go well, or why sometimes against all odds they do go well. And so it's just, I just so, genuinely happy for all those people who have had those success stories out there after all the odds feel like they've been against them.
Yeah, it's the thing we always talk about is the perseverance and pushing through. Kind of funny. I had that story from your old group. There was a patient that we were doing outside monitoring for, and she's tried like all the clinics in town, and she couldn't, wasn't having success. So she finally said, "Hey, I'm going to go see CCRM." And this is before CCRM was the big conglomerate they are now. This was back when it was just, Schoolcraft and everything in Denver. And so, so she went there and started the cycle. And we're talking like FSH of, I want to say like 24, 25 at that time. Wasn't making a lot of eggs. Estrogen level was low. And so, she got canceled. So she was about 5 days into it. They canceled her and said, unfortunately, we have to cancel you. And she was freaking out, and she calls us up and says, like, can we keep going? I'm like, I don't see why not. I mean, we don't have any rule that you can't. So, we let her keep going. And this cycle that got canceled actually ended up getting her a couple embryos. She got a normal embryo, did a transfer, and then having success. And so here it is that someone who was told to stop a cycle on her own, being an advocate for herself, said, you know what, let me call around. Let me see if I can find someone else. And, was able to have a baby. And like I said, I mean, there's just so many great stories out there like this. And that's why I hope people will share them, because I mean, if anything, it should give people hope. And, I always say, you don't have to show your face. So feel free to come on and tell your story. But I think what we'll do is, I mean, I can go on and on with stories and stuff like that, but I think it'd be great if we bring on one of our guests. I'll let her kind of give her own introduction, but it's a very unique story, and I think if if anyone wants to get hope, it's definitely from her. So, well, perfect. Let me make sure that she can come on a little bit early, and can you come on early, you think? Okay, perfect. So we're gonna get her on the stage here, and hey, Namita.
Hi, nice to see you.
Oh, it's a pleasure seeing you. And honestly, I haven't seen you until probably 5 minutes before the show was the first time I've seen you in a while. I know you've been busy with that little one.
Yeah, I think the last time you saw me, I was 11 weeks pregnant and discharging from your care. I have to apologize. There's an echo in this room. I'm actually moving into a new space. So I'm standing here in a perfectly painted room that's quiet. And for the first time in probably 11 months, I'm alone for a few minutes.
So you want this show to last as long as possible so you can spend some free time.
I would say yes, except I think when you go through this journey, it humbles you to the gift that they are. And so even when they're screaming their head off and you just want to tell them to go the F to sleep because you're exhausted, you can still take a moment to pause and say, like, this wasn't promised, this wasn't guaranteed. She's actually with my family right now upstairs, so I could hop on and do this. But yeah, I mean, where do we even start with my story?
Oh, it's fascinating, your story. I mean, there's so many layers to it as well. I think that, if people want to have hope, I think your story is definitely a story of hope.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start with the first thing that I will probably always have gratitude for you all. And, you took me on when most IVF clinics wouldn't have considered me because I would have been a bad gamble. I would have been a bad bet. I was 42 years old when I came to you. I was on my second marriage. And not that marital status had anything to do with it, but where that's relevant to my story that I kind of figured out after the fact is that I kept marrying the wrong people and all I wanted was a baby. So all I wanted was to be a mom and to do that journey with someone who wanted to do it as much as I did. And in both marriages, at some point, they came to a natural end when we realized we wanted different things. And in the case of my second marriage, that's actually my donor. We were married and we came to you actually out of a moment of desperation. We were looking at an IVF clinic in Southern California where I was living. And he's a first responder and had a critical incident and a blood exposure that kind of grounded us until we knew that he was okay medically. And in that time, on a lark, I called your office again, and lo and behold, you had thrown the wait list out and recrafted things, and it was the beginning of many of your own reinventions in terms of business. And we were able to get in. And at that point, I actually then, I think, went down on your wait list. You may not even know this part of the story. I went down on the wait list and then thought I had a chemical pregnancy on my own. And there were some tough conversations that made me start to doubt whether this individual wanted kids as much as I did. So I called the clinic back and I said, there's couples that are on the same page and ready to go forward. Take me off the list and give them my spot. And it was devastating to do that because at my age, every month counted. And so eventually I found my way to you again, still married. At this point, actually married to this person. At that point, I think we weren't married and I was still trying because I was the age I was. And ultimately we went through 5 rounds of IVF with you. You were very honest and transparent and said, like, I think we can get you pregnant, but it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be 1 round. And it was one of those things where you were always really honest with me, even when it was hard. And one of the things I've always respected about the experience with you is that you had the hard conversations, including how many times did we cancel a cycle? And we went through 5 rounds. I was always a low producer of eggs. I was 42 at the time. And even for my age, my OAR was lousy. I mean, it came back, everything was red. Everything was 1 or 0, or I don't even know, can it be 0? I don't remember now. But it was
negative,
bad.
at least.
Yeah, it was really bad. And it was one of those where I was like, oh crap, like this isn't gonna work. And I was also a busy professional and traveled a lot for work. I do a lot of expert work. And so sometimes I was in Japan, sometimes I was in Germany, sometimes I was in New York filming for true crimes. I was doing all sorts of stuff. And I made a deep decision for myself that I knew this wasn't a guarantee. And my first baby was my career and my first love was my career. And I knew that if it failed, I had to have something to come back to. But The punchline, we can zigzag all around. The punchline is this: I ended up waking up, we did 5 rounds. We started then, that was in 2019. I was 42. I think I turned 43 during some of our cycles, or maybe I just turned 42. Then I think we started to try and do embryo transfers, and those all kind of didn't go so well. And you had the courage and guts to cancel me and ground me, because you knew we ultimately only had 3 genetically normal embryos to mess with and to try. And you were very honest with me that you didn't think continuing on would get me a whole lot more in terms of results. And spiritually, I always said going into this, I would know when I was done. And I remember leaving my 5th transfer, or excuse me, my 5th egg retrieval, and driving back to the airport, because it was a constant, always between Phoenix and, at the time, Southern California. And I remember driving back to the airport to catch my flight home and thinking, I think I'm done. No matter what PGS results are, I'm done now. I can't do any more rounds. I don't have it in me emotionally. And I did most of it on my own, even though I was married, gave myself my own shots, got myself to the airport, got myself to the clinic, paid for it, did all of that on my own. And then 2020 rolled around. We started trying to do the embryo transfers. My lining just kind of didn't want to work with us. We did a lot of efforts, canceled a lot. I lost track. I think the total number of canceled cycles might have been 9 or 10.
It was a lot.
It was a lot. And at that point, somewhere in between then, a pandemic blew through. We got grounded. We jumped ahead of the curve, I think 3 or 4 days before, and said, everyone's going to get grounded. Let's do it proactively. Some more things revealed themselves about the difference of what I wanted and my then partner wanted, and that process. And then during that time that we were on freeze, and my eggs were on ice, my embryos were on freeze, I woke up and I realized that was deeply what I wanted. And I either wanted to do it on my own and do it well, or do it with someone who wanted children. And ultimately, the person that I had created these embryos with wasn't the person that I thought that they were, and hadn't really represented their commitment to this accurately. So then began the battle legally over embryos, and had to hire a law firm that does surrogacy and embryo law in California to secure their rights. Meanwhile, there's all this political stuff going on in Alabama, and Roe v. Wade, and I mean, all this stuff was blowing up, and it always seemed to happen like right at the times I had really pivotal moments. And then I told you, I think I told the clinic, I said, keep them on ice. I'll be back. I need to secure this legally, and I need to do some soul searching, because now the terms have changed. At that point, I was now 45, 46. So it wasn't supposed to take that long. I wasn't supposed to be that old. And I was going to be doing it single. And 1 year turned into 2 years. And I knew I'd be ready. And then I was ready. And I cannot believe how smoothly the cycle went.
Yeah, you had a lot of support, obviously your sister and stuff, and that was always nice to have there. And I think that's important when people are going through, is that support system. I think what made your situation so unique was when you went through, you had the problem with the eggs, and then you had the problem with the uterus. And I don't think we were thinking about that. That wasn't something that really we knew for sure was going to be that bad. And that's why we had to keep canceling, because we didn't have a lot of shots. We knew we had to get this right.
Yeah.
And remember, we were trying all types of experimental things. And in the end, I told you about that small study I read that, talked about that wash. And I said, listen, what do we have to lose? Let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
And it worked. And I mean, I'm telling you, trust me, I was so happy. It's one of those ones that you go, a 5 year in the making type of thing, like we're 6 technically. Like, it was just one of those things where I thought, wow, we put so much into it, and it finally happened.
I know.
And I know you felt in your mind like it may not, but I got to do this. We just got to move forward, because we talked about other things too.
We did. And the thing is, what's interesting is you and I think, really we really did work as a team together. It really was constantly like these dugout conversations where it's like, okay, what are we going to do? Like, we're down this much. How are we going to come back? We became the comeback team. It was like the comeback kid, and we did it. And it was very much a situation where I think you and I actually regrouped before, when I returned to IVF after 2 years, and said, okay, let's look at all the old linings. Let's look at the millimeters. Let's look at where things were. Let's talk about quality versus quantity. And let's look at qualitatively, what do we think the best is my body can do? And are we going to say that even though the research, we want to strive to 8, my body's not going to make 8. I'm old. My body's not going to do it. I don't know if it ever could have done it, because I wasn't thinking about being pregnant in my 20s and 30s, because I was off getting a doctorate degree and starting a career. And I'm so grateful that we thought outside the box and we were willing to swing for the fences, because I wouldn't have my amazing 11-month-old right now if we hadn't done that. And you know, I think that the acceptance that it might not work was both psychologically protective. You know, you're always in this limbo status. And for me, because I'm a psychologist, I really got into not only the science of this, and I geeked out on the science of it, but I also emotionally really dug deep in some places throughout the process and made a decision to be really 100% transparent and an open book with people, because I felt like if, as a psychologist, I couldn't connect those emotional dots on what this does to people and talk about it, how could you expect anybody to talk about what is actually a trauma? And it's a trauma that keeps going for so many reasons, and people don't talk about it. So they're like the walking wounded. And yet then you have to rapidly switch gears every single cycle to go, but I know you can do it, and to give your body a pep talk. You feel like there's failure, but then you have to give yourself a pep talk. And then I found myself in this weird place of like, I remember that very, very first call from Gigi after the transfer. And I just remember there was not enough air or oxygen in the room for her to get to the point. And I was like totally holding my breath, bracing myself for her to say, it didn't take. And like already had started the pep talk of, you've got 2 more, we're gonna get there. And then she said, your number's at 5. And then I remember my brain rapidly went to, wait, what the hell does that mean? Is that good? Is that bad? Like, what is it? You're always in that place of trying to hurry up and wait. And it really was quite a process. I think if you and I had not adjusted our expectations and been really realistic about a few things, I don't think we would be here right now.
Do you feel like setting those expectations helped you make it that goal line? Because that's the one thing I've seen people where they expect to work in one and then they almost lose hope. And I think it is good for a doctor to just be straight up and say, listen, this isn't going to happen in one. It could take 2, 3, 4. Be prepared for that.
Yeah.
Did that help you keep your eye on the finish line?
It did. I think it helped me both make decisions because you were so straightforward and transparent about things. And sure, there were times I didn't want a cycle canceled. I mean, whoever wants a cycle canceled? And you always had that look on your face. And I knew the minute you came in, I'm like, damn, like I knew exactly from the look on your face or how long I was in the room. I'm like, oh no, this isn't good. If it was good news, you'd zip in and zip out. But I think, all jokes aside, I think knowing what we were up against and always having your honesty of what our options were, why you didn't feel confident about it or good about doing it, and why you were strongly advising against it or flat out declining to do it, was really important. And it was important at so many stages, from our first consultation when you looked at my labs from California. And we had that delay because my then husband was a first responder with that blood exposure. And you could see in 1 year how much everything tanked. And I remember asking you so many questions about, is it because I'm a year older? Is it because of this? Is it because of that? We talked about the potential that I was a carrier for a Fragile X and, a de novo carrier and all these other genetic things. And that was hard to hear because we didn't yet have that relationship professionally as a patient and doctor. But the trust really rapidly for me built because of the transparency. And I knew that if I was going off in left field, you'd tell me that, because I feel like that's the other thing that can happen. It kind of becomes like the slot machine. You just keep putting a quarter in and hoping it will pay out. And I knew that for you all at New Directions, I wasn't going to fall into that boat. You would cut me off before that would happen. And so, yeah, I think it helped me keep my eye on the ball. I think it kept me humble and not, when I say arrogant, it kept me not overly confident. I had to stay measured about it. But I also remember, the things somebody else told me, one of my colleagues who had been through it, she said, it's a roller coaster. The highs don't last very long, but neither do the lows. And I've never forgotten that. It's like the lows suck. I mean, they're really bad. And for anybody who's watching right now who is trying to figure out if you're going to do it, if you're going to continue, who's grieving over losses or failures, the fact that I'm able to smile and laugh right now after what we've been through, because it feels like a war. And it's a war with your body. It's a war against your body. It's a war with your partner. It's a war against your partner. It's a war against the world. I mean, there's so much wrapped up in it. And the fact that I can sit here and smile and laugh, I know that I'm a more capable parent because of this, but I'm also, I think, a more humble person because of it, because I trotted through a lot of success in my life professionally and just never really ever thought infertility would be my story. I never thought multiple marriages would be my story. I never thought multiple divorces would be my story. I never thought that single motherhood by choice would be my story. And it took me a long time to even own that label, because I was like, well, am I really a single mother by choice? Because I was married to the person who's the donor. And I didn't expect to do this. And then I thought about it and I'm like, no, every step of the way, Namita, you had a choice. Every step of the way, you chose to leave that marriage. You chose to fight for the embryos and take custody of them legally. You chose to return to IVF knowing you'd do this as a single woman. And that became actually incredibly empowering for me. But I think, yeah, the fact that you guys are as honest as you are, I think is hugely important for patients, because they do need to know what they're dealing with. And they do need to understand you're so transparent about this might not work. I have a friend and colleague who actually I sent to you, who I think was like 49 at the time. And I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, who I'm thinking about, just law enforcement. And I remember saying to her after her egg retrieval, I said, listen, you'll know in your heart, you're old enough, you're mature enough, you know yourself. You'll know when they call you to let you know how it went. You'll know if you're ready to do a second cycle or not. And she and I had a pretty macabre laugh after you guys called, because the embryo made it to day 4 and then arrested. And she only got 1. And she said to me, she goes, don't you think that's kind of a humdinger that I'm a freaking cop and I have an embryo that arrested? And I said, what do you think you want to do? It's too soon. You just got the call. And she said, I'm done. She said, I'm 49. He was really honest with me. She said, you came in just under the radar age-wise. She said, I'm older than you. She said, it's the only regret I'll have in my life. But she said, I'm so happy you gave yourself that shot. And at the time, I wasn't pregnant. I had embryos and was still married to the person that was her, she was their boss. So yeah, I mean, honesty is really important, but I also think the support system is. I mean, I always had a lot of my friends that they didn't understand it, but they weren't scared to ask questions because I was just brutally honest about it.
I mean, that is one of the reasons why I am honest. It's not to bring anyone down. And I tell people that. I say to them, I'm telling you this because I want you to know what you're up against. So they're able to persevere past it. I saw someone was talking, saying in a question about, kind of, you don't mind explaining what helped you have the hope going through all this. And then she even said, is hope the word we should use in this process? Is it more perseverance? What, the question. So what could you share to people? Like, and again, your story is so unique in the fact that you had the issues of fertility, had relationship issues, went through, as you said, a pandemic, then found out had uterine issues, had legal issues, and you never gave up. And
Yeah.
so the question is, what could you tell people, I mean, obviously now you look and go, I would have done even more after having a little, but what can you tell people just to help them get through that, even when it felt like everything was against you?
Yeah. I mean, there were definitely times that I can remember when we canceled cycles and I would fly home or drive back and I would think, maybe you don't get to have everything you want in life. Maybe I have this amazing career and I love what I do. Maybe that's it for me and that has to be enough. I think the perseverance, I think one, temperamentally, I'm not a quitter. And I think anybody who finds their way to an IVF clinic has that courage automatically. I think it takes a lot of courage for a human being to face when they need help, regardless of whether it's mental health, medical health, physical health, whatever it might be. And I think that the minute that somebody makes the decision to say, I'm going to at least explore this to understand what my options are, you've shown courage. You've shown willingness to ask for help. And I think that some of what helped me persevere was taking it in small chunks. I tried to just not get caught up in what could be coming down the road. I tried to take it as, okay, right now we're focusing on getting me eggs. And I remember, and I used humor a lot. Humor was a huge thing for me. I mean, we started calling the eggs, we meaning one of my girlfriends and I, who's Italian. And so we started calling them the little bocconcinis, like the little tiny balls of mozzarella. And then we started calling them the teeny tinies. And then when I had to do my PIO shot, she'd go, ooh, they really are a pain in the ass, And I think humor is a really important piece of this. I think being able to laugh even when you are going to cry and you are heartbroken and you're devastated and you're scared. But I think taking it in small chunks was really helpful for me in persevering. I think staying confident and grounded in my choice of medical professionals and clinics was really important for anybody who doesn't feel that sense of trust and partnership and teamwork. I think pay attention to that because you're about to go through some of your best highs and your lowest lows. And if you don't feel comfortable talking with your doctor about those things, that's a hard thing. That's a really hard thing. But I think a lot of it was chunking out the goals and not getting focused. And the reason I say that is because I feel like it doesn't always end. So now, I mean, to fast forward, I'm in a position now where I had an amazing pregnancy until 35 weeks and 4 days. And then everything went sideways. And I remember saying, like, all of a sudden preeclampsia kicked in fiercely. And I remember saying, oh, that's what that OAR was predicting. Oh, crap. Like, we made it that far. I literally was doing a plank in Pilates the day before. And I was so proud of myself and my belly. And I didn't gain a lot of weight and I didn't show very much. And it was one of those, and then everything went sideways. And the high risk OB at the hospital was like, if we don't induce you, we're looking at organ failure tonight. And I'm like, what? Like, that doesn't happen to someone like me. And so again, that weird pothole of thinking that, like, this doesn't happen to me. This isn't my story. Like, no, I made it this far in the pregnancy. This isn't how this story ends. We don't end up with a preemie and we don't end up dead. And yet both were at risk. And she ended up being amazing and beautiful. And now I'm like, I really wanted a sibling and I'm 48. And it was so scary those last few weeks. And like Dr. Salem alluded to with one of his patients, surrogacy doesn't feel right to me for a lot of reasons. So now begins the hard decision. I just paid my storage fee. Again, what do I do with them?
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? I mean, my little munchkin is going to be 18 months old in April and starting at Montessori and starting school. And I'm already going, where did all this time go? She's like standing up independently and ready to like walk and do all these things. And I look at her every single day and I'm like, you don't even realize what a miracle you are. And yet I want that again. So it's just, this roller coaster is crazy. It keeps going. The biggest thing is know why you got into it. Know why you want to be a parent. I think that's the other piece of it. Don't do it just to say it's what I'm supposed to do because social pressure says we're a pronatal society and you're supposed to have kids.
Well, on that topic, I think it would be nice to just show people what that award was that you had. And so we'd love to show just some photos of your little one here.
I'm
And
never
so
going to say no. I love looking at my little munchkin.
well, let's grab some photos here. So, and if you want to tell everyone your little munchkin's name.
Yeah, so her first name is Ashvi. I wanted her, she's half Indian and half Jewish, and I wanted her to have some roots back to her identity, even though she's going to be second generation American. And interestingly, her middle name is Phoenix, but not because of where you guys are, because then I guess it would have been Gilbert. No, it's after the bird that rises from the ashes and is resilient.
And then here, I got another one here. We're going to put this one up.
That is us at Grandma's house. She's
Well,
got her two little teeth.
I mean, just adorable. And you can see on your face, it really is one of the most wonderful things when you get to that finish line. And, obviously my heart always goes out to people who haven't got there, but like, I really appreciate you sharing your story and, like I said, coming on here and answering, these for people.
Yeah.
So really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think for any of your patients, maybe who are struggling, I mean, always know you can put me in touch with them or put them in touch with me, because I do think it's helpful to talk with other people going through it also, or who have been through it, because I'm now walking around as a mother who's an infertile person. That identity doesn't go away. People just don't know that about me because I walk around as a mother now.
Well, thank you again so much
Yeah,
for your story.
absolutely. I'm looking forward to meeting her at some point.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Well, it looks like right now at the moment, Dr. Salem, it looks like it disconnected. But we do have some other people who are interested in coming on. And again, if you have a story, please, come on, tell us your story. It will be a lot of hope for other patients as well. Irina's here, and so we're going to put her on the screen. Hi, Irina. I think you're on mute right now.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Hi, Dr. Amos.
Yes, absolutely. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm really good. I know I don't have yet successful story, but I'm trying and I will keep trying. And I'm so happy that I found you, because it's very important to find good doctor, right doctor, which is for you, which is always support, help. And Dr. Amos, you are the best. And I'm so happy. And yeah, I had one IVF, which was unsuccessful. My embryo did not survive. I had 5 embryo, and by day 5, they did not survive. So I did not give up. For another IVF, and my another IVF, we changed IVC because I had only one egg grew, and that egg was abnormal, so we could not do anything. And finally, my third IVC was very successful. Kind of like I had 3 embryo which survived by day 5 when we had transfer, but it did not become pregnancy. So I will try one more time, and I am happy that I found you, and I know I'm old, I'm 45, and I try to do with my own eggs. So
What would you tell others then? That pushing through, because again, we've always talked about too. How things are tougher, especially when older, and that it can be hard. And we've also worked around certain things for you. What would you tell others who are in your same shoes and that they keep trying and stuff like that?
just don't give up, because I did a lot of research. So always say first IVF is usually not successful. Don't give up. If you really want baby, just don't give up, because now if you have that opportunity, if you still have like ovulation and you still can do it, do it, because later when you already will be older, you can punish yourself. Why I did not try one more time? If I could, I had chance to try one more time and I did not. So to tell you in future that you did everything for your dream come true, you should try as many times as you can.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we'll all be praying for you. I'm sure everyone who's watching this is going to be praying for you as well. And like I said, and I hope we do get there for you. And I appreciate you sharing your story and giving other people the hope to keep trying and the the perseverance.
Yeah, and I I found your show Sperm Meets Eggs, and I am now watching all your shows, and it's very helpful. Thank you so
Well,
much. I learn a lot. I try follow your recommendation with diet, with everything. So I hope my next IVC will be successful.
I
Thank
do
you so
too.
much.
Well, no problem. Thanks so much.
What a beautiful
That,
story. Thanks for coming on there. Yeah.
yeah. It really is amazing when you think about like how women, they keep pushing on, and like even these stories where it almost feels like it's impossible. And that's one of the first stories I started with a person who had, 8 embryos in the last one. And it's just these are the people who come away successful. I mean, the thing you and I always talk about is it's not about just getting lucky. Yes, there is a lot of chance in this stuff, but it's pushing forward, which is
Yeah.
hard.
There's a word I use, and I don't use it lightly, and I even sometimes I'm even hesitant to use it, but it's grit. I just find that it takes a lot of grit to get through IVF. Um, and I think there are different vehicles for having to maintain that grit. For some people, it's realism, like Namita was talking about. Like, hey, Dr. Amos always gives it to you straight. Dr. Amos is a very optimistic guy. I know him for a long time, but he gives it to you straight. And I think other people, they may call it hope that feeds into the grit. So I think these are all like very valuable vehicles that ultimately get us to the same place, which is, unfortunately, IVF is not the most perfect tool. There's a percentage chance, and sometimes you just have to keep rolling the dice. And I always talk to my patients about everybody has so much emotional, financial, and physical bandwidth. And how much do you have to get through to that next stage? And there's no wrong answer. There's absolutely, you might not have enough to do one cycle, and that's okay. But it's important to be able to gauge that. And, on that note, one thing that I wanted to bring up, and Dr. Amos, I hope you could kind of weigh in on this one too, because I don't want to leave this group out of it. It's a huge group that I find to be very, very inspiring, which is the group that has used egg donors. And, it is just such a heartwarming story for me that people think about this and they wrestle with their thoughts, and then they realize, much like what Namita was saying there, is what is it that you want? What is it that you ultimately want? And I've never spoken to somebody, a parent, who has come back after using an egg donor and said, "Oh, I wish I would have had not done that," or I wish or I wish it was my own genetic child. I've never heard that phrase come up. I know that's the barrier to getting there, but I've just never heard it on the back end. Nobody ever says that. And I wish we had somebody that has that story that could come on, or maybe Dr. Amos, you could share one of those stories.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely true. It's actually the one thing I talked to the patient about. I had a patient this week who wanted to use her sister for donor eggs, and when she went to the sister was fine with it, but the husband said no, and he said it would be weird having another kid out there. And one of the things I taught the patients about is this idea that your DNA isn't your DNA; it's your parents' DNA. What makes you you isn't even all the DNA you have. It's just certain portions of that DNA that's making certain proteins that makes you the way you are. And again, that's why you can have a kid that looks nothing like you, but looks like an uncle from 2 generations ago or something, like that. It's because of those things. And so I always tell them, like, never be worried about that. I think one thing that you kind of brought up, and I think was brought by some of the people, is that this idea of to be able to have this perseverance, to be able to keep pushing forward, the grit that you talked about. I think that's where you do need to have a decent doctor. You need someone to give you realistic expectations, but also to keep giving you some hope. And again, not blind hope, but some hope, and I'll give you an example of where this comes up is, patients will say, I've been through 4 cycles. Matter of fact, I believe I even spoke this about with Namita, who was on here. And I said to her, they go, well, I've been through so many. And you go, but when you really compare yourself to everyone else, have you? Because if you think about it, someone else goes through, they get 16 eggs in 1 cycle. You're only getting 3 each time. 4 cycles, you only got 12. You haven't even got what they got. So although I agree that someone who goes through and they're getting 36 eggs every time and doesn't get pregnant after 3 cycles, it could be quite daunting. But the person's only getting 3 eggs each time. It's like, well, really, you finally just got to the same chance as everyone else of your peers. It just took you more cycles to get there. And so those type of talks, I think, help people kind of realign their expectations. And by realigning them, they can go, okay, wait a second, that's kind of true. I really, even though I've done 4 cycles and I'm talking to people who've done, 2 and they got pregnant, I have to look at myself and go, it's a different story. And I think that's where all these stories come in. And I think why, when I talk to patients, I always want to make sure they understand that, yeah, it might be hard, but realign it. And I do tell people when I don't think it's going to work, I will tell them, but I still say to them, listen, if you need to try for closure, I'll let you do it. But I'm not going to lie and tell you that it's going to work. I said, it always can work. There's always a chance, but sometimes it's very low. But yeah, you're right about the obstacle of people using donors. And I think, I think the thing that we have to get out and educate people about is that, as you said, never have I had the patient that. And I actually had patients come back and go exactly what you said. They said, I see this kid as if it was from my DNA. The kid acts just like us. I should say but the kid acts just like us. It makes the same smiles, because that stuff is that whole idea of nurture versus nature. And, I think you hit that point perfectly.
Yeah, it's a tough one for sure. And again, I just think that, there are a lot of success stories among people who, may have experienced a lot of, I don't want to call it failure. I feel like that's the wrong word. People use that word in our field, in the scientific world. They call it IVF failure. I don't know if that's the right word for it. I think you're just making progress towards where you eventually are going to be. And I think that, with donor eggs, this is one of those where so often people look back and they look at their journey, the trajectory, the arc of everything that they've done. And they say, that's how I landed with my baby. And I'm so lucky that I found the donor I found. I got pregnant when I got pregnant. I have this life that I have professionally, or relationships, or whatever it might be. And, I found my place as a mother, as a father, and I think that's what true success looks like, is just being very comfortable, happy, fulfilled in that place that you find yourself in. And again, I just, on our side of the equation, we just have so many people come and they drop back into our life for a moment, and they, show us their baby, and we just get this little snapshot of this whole thing that they're experiencing. And I just think it's amazing. It really makes everything we're doing so worthwhile.
Absolutely. And I mean, I can tell you, even while we're doing this show, I see one of the patients I know who has had a different type of obstacle, lots of miscarriages and things like that. And, I know they're actively pregnant now, and I'm praying for them, and I can't wait till they can come on the show next time to share their story of perseverance, but it's not just not getting success, but it's the miscarriages and things like that. And I think when Namita talked about it earlier, when she said that she had that point where, when something started going wrong, like, oh no. And I can tell you, even personally, I remember when my wife and I, when we still couldn't believe that we were pregnant with our daughters, around the 23-week range, when we found out that my wife's cervix was shortening, we thought, there's this weird thought you have in your head as a fertility patient, like, okay, something's going to go wrong. And I remember we were just kind of like, yep, here it is. This is, we're going to lose them, because, this weird feeling of like, I don't know, everything's against you type of thing. And so it's so amazing when we get to the end. And like I said, I know we didn't have a ton of people coming on to share stories, but I hope the ones that did, will help people, and the stories we shared will help people as well. Um, Anything else you have to talk about, Dr. Sam, or would like to share with everyone before we start heading off?
Yeah, I mean, I think really it's wonderful to see these success stories, and I think I think maybe it was Namita who said this as well, but like the periods of time where you really embrace that success, or unfortunately are in the lows of the quote unquote failures, are fortunately relatively short in our world. And I think that for many people, just like you said, it's like the success of IVF can feel very fleeting. So as wonderful as it is and amazing as it is, it's like finally you're pregnant, everything's going well, and you're graduating from the IVF clinic. I think that for a lot of people, it's just like you said, it's the beginning of still hard steps to come. And I think that's just an important reminder, of saying, hey, listen, like you've overcome this first huge, massive hurdle. And also don't think it's always going to be smooth sailing from here. We know that the research would also show that patients who have IVF pregnancies tend to ride a little bit more anxious throughout their whole pregnancy. And even after the delivery, I saw one study where it showed that they have more pediatrician visits, although they're perfectly fine. The kids are totally fine. We know that long-term IVF data shows kids do just as well. And so it is interesting, there is a little bit of a staying effect that keeps on a little bit. And I just think it's, important to know that, and should be reassuring, I hope.
Oh, it's definitely 100% real. We were helicopter parents both times, and it's interesting too. Like I grew up, and my dad we didn't really do a lot. We weren't really like a tight family. But he took care of us, a great dad, everything like that. But what's weird is like with my kids, I mean, I always tell you, we're always having like, on Sunday fun days, we go out to Top Golf, we're always doing things all the time. I remember so much that when my daughter just left to college, she's like now missing everything, and I've talked to my wife before, and I said, I feel like sometimes we work so hard to get to this point that like we want to enjoy it. Like I almost feel like I want to get my money's worth in some ways, but jokingly saying that, my emotional money's worth. And yeah, there is something different, being infertile and getting there is a lot different. And I think the things that I think would be important tonight is to remind people, obviously have hope, but have realistic hope, because that's going to help you know what you need to do. If you have an unrealistic hope, you're going to give up sooner. And that's the one thing we know for sure that leads to people not having success, is stopping, and possibly stopping for the wrong reasons, not even realizing that, no, this is expected. We expect it to take more than one try. As we always talk about, people over 40 can take more than one try. And then having, being at a place that you feel helps you with that goal, like there are many great clinics out there, but that doesn't mean that that's a great clinic for you. Just like I tell people, even with us, we're not the perfect clinic for everyone. I think you got to find that person that fits well with you, that helps you along that road, encourages you, but again, not blindly. And any other, words you have for people, moving forward. I think one point before I have you jump on is kind of even like when we talk about PGT, I know you and I, we do believe in almost anyone can use PGT. And it goes back to that principle I said again, where the time to baby makes a big difference. I look at Namita and go, that's amazing. Namita still follow through. I think a lot of people would have just never kept moving forward. And so that time to baby plays a big part in that hope. And, it's keeping people around. And so it's just love to hear your, point of view on that too, of how all these little things like, doing PGT, having the right doctor, all these things can help someone succeed, even though it's obviously science that helps us get there.
Yeah.
You still have to have someone who has the energy to keep doing it.
Definitely. I mean, on that note, like the energy to keep doing it, I wish, like, honestly, that patients, that when I met with them the first time, they would just think about those three buckets. How much, emotional, financial, physical bandwidth do I have to go through this? And I think those are pretty comprehensive buckets. But if you think about that, you can really probably make a better plan with your fertility doctor and your team if you share those things. I think there's no shame in sharing those things. And by the way, it's not going to change the medical side of it. It's going to change the social, psychological planning side of it. You know, they're going to doctors are going to optimize your cycle in every which way that they can. You know, even if you tell them, hey, I could do 2 cycles or something. But
exactly, yeah, it makes it more holistic. You know, we're able to pick the whole picture in, because we don't always know those things. You know, when someone tells us, it makes a difference. So, well, I really appreciate everyone that came on. You know, it's always great, Dr. Salem, and you know, I know I think for our next show we were talking about, we're going to be doing it about ways of fertilization like ICSI and standard SEM, and you know, why someone would choose that or not. You know, so if you have questions about that, definitely come on next time. But we appreciate everyone that came on, and appreciate everyone who's watching.
Have a good night.
Well, you have a good night. Bye-bye.
Got the knowledge, the power to grow. Sperm meets egg, let the healing flow. Fertile grounds, we explore. Life's a journey, so much in store. Got the knowledge, the power to grow. Sperm meets egg, let the healing flow. Step in, let's talk about the facts. Women's health, let's watch how it cracks. Cycles turning, it's more than just chance. In this moment, we're taking a stance. Voices rising, we're breaking the mold. Deep conversations, we're watching them fold. From the roots to the stars, is one and the same. Empowered together, we're winning this game.